Hello there and welcome to Brussels, My Love, Euronews' weekly talk show that dives into all there is to love and perhaps loathe about EU policy making. I'm Maeve McMahon. Thank you so much for joining us. Coming up on the show, already 100 days in office, NATO chief Mark Rutte addressed the European Parliament in Brussels this week. On the agenda, the Russia-Ukraine war, turmoil in Syria and the Middle East. For the EU, it's now Kaja Kallas responsible for these challenges. She is our top diplomat, our new face on the global stage. But with so much at stake in a fast-moving world, we're asking if the former Prime Minister of Estonia is up to the task. And we need to talk about Austria. Interim Chancellor Alexander Schallenberg was in town this week, telling his EU counterparts not to panic, that his country would stay a reliable, constructive partner. Brussels is freaking out over the potential appointment as Chancellor of the right-wing firebrand Herbert Kickl, one of the most successful figureheads for Europe's far right. A very warm welcome to our guests this weekend. Andreas Schieder, Austrian MEP with the Socialists and Democrats.
Hello.
Martha Mutznik, EU Senior Analyst with the International Crisis Group.
Hello, good morning.
And Rio Terras, Estonian MEP with the European People's Party.
Hello.
Great to have you all here. Thank you so much. But before we hear your views, let's just introduce our viewers to the brand new EU Foreign Affairs Chief.
At home, some call her Estonia's Iron Lady. A year ago, Russia put the then Prime Minister on a wanted list because of her efforts to remove Soviet-era war monuments in the Baltic nation. Kaja Kallas, the new EU High Representative for Foreign and Security Policy. She now inherits a role that has faced significant criticism over the past years. Some even called it the EU's most pointless job. But her reputation as a hawk might help her navigate the urgent challenges around Europe. The Ukraine-Russia war and possible peace talks, new relations with the emerging regime in Syria, uncertainties of the Trump administration, and dealing with unpredictable partners from Ankara to Jerusalem to Beijing. Does the 47-year-old former Prime Minister have what it takes to turn the EU into a global leader?
So there you go, a little portrait of Kaja Kallas. Let's look at Rio Terras from Estonia. You know her pretty well. She's not that popular, I believe, back home in Estonia, but more liked across the continent.
Yeah, we have always seen that she has been the best foreign minister for Estonia ever. The problem was she was prime minister, so there were some questions about her internal politics, but she was very capable, and she is very capable in foreign policy. So, and I think the first time in the history of European Union, High Representative job is somebody who has been sitting at the council table as a prime minister now in this job, and that gives her a leverage which the previous representatives didn't have. So I'm really hoping that she will be up to the task.
Indeed, it's almost giving more importance to this job, putting a former head of state into its shoes, replacing Joseph Borrell. But it's almost a poison chalice too, Martha, because it is a job that, as we saw there, many call pointless, because as Foreign Affairs Chief of the European Union, you don't really have much clout. You're just really in the shadows of the EU government's foreign affairs ministers.
Yes, exactly. I think that could be a challenge, because she's known to be have very strong ideological convictions. She's a pragmatic leader. She's a doer, and she may become a little bit frustrated by the fact that she's somewhat straitjacketed by the system of sort of deliberate and slow decision making that is EU foreign policy making, whereby all the decisions have to be taken by consensus. The EU is a consensus-based organization, so I think Kaja Kallas is obviously up to the task. The question is also the extent to which the bloc and the EU is up to the task also to confront the range and of conflicts and crises that are erupting not only in Europe's neighborhood but across the world, and also sort of a highly volatile geopolitical environment. So,
as you say, Kaja Kallas is a doer. On her first day of the job, she was straight on the train to Kiev. She also dressed in the Ukrainian colours when she showed up first in the European Parliament plenary in Strasbourg. Is she fit for the task, do you think? Or do you think it's a pointless job she has?
I think it is an important job. And if she's fit to all the challenges which are coming up, we will see. Of course, as you mentioned, dressed up in Ukrainian, along, let's say, a strong point on Ukraine at the beginning. But in the meantime, also other challenges arose. Now, we have Syria on the table. So it is also something where she quickly has to also formulate a European standpoint, how to guarantee stability in the region and not to allow the Islamists to become too Islamist, but on the other way also to find a way to stabilize the situation. And also in the last days we had this upcoming Trump administration, which already is sending the messages, strange, dangerous messages also on foreign policy from Greenland to Canada, Panama and so on. So I think this is quickly also needed that she will be enabled by also the other 27 foreign ministers to formulate a European position, that Europe is on the table, because until now, since the beginning of the year, we don't see Europe. We see very much America. We see very, very many problems, but we don't see European Union.
Yeah, well, the problem is Borrell wasn't even not invited to these tables, and I hope that she will make sure that she will be part of the discussions everywhere. Knowing her personally, I would say she will do all possible to really try to get all the European foreign ministers behind her, and then force herself to the tables where Europe needs to be, that nobody will talk about Ukraine without the European Union, nobody will talk about our policies in Syria or in the area without the European Union, because the European Union is the biggest payer in the region. Okay, US does it as well, but they do it from the national point of view, and European Union does it from the democracy point of view.
And even in Ramstein last week, she was very clear that the European Union would be able to alone support Ukraine, be the leader there if the United States was not willing. But just on Ukraine, we wanted to hear what the situation was like on the battlefield there, and also in the Kursk region, the western Russian area that Ukrainian soldiers crossed into just a couple of months ago. So we got an update from our Ukraine correspondent, Sasha Vakalini.
North Korean troops have so far suffered 3,000 casualties in Russia's Kursk region. That's both killed and wounded, according to South Korean National Intelligence Service. Seoul backed up also first claims by Kyiv about capturing 2 North Korean soldiers as the prisoners of war. That's the first statement since North Korea entered Russia's war against Ukraine in autumn 2024. And as Ukrainian forces are intensifying their assault in Russia's Kursk region, Russian troops are intensifying their efforts moving in eastern Ukraine at the pace not seen since the early days of the full-scale invasion, getting closer to the administrative border of Ukraine's Donetsk region, Moscow's goal since the first invasion in 2014.
That's Euronews' Sasha Vakalini there on how Ukrainians and Russian troops are intensifying their efforts. But at this stage, we see the morale is quite low of the troops there on the ground. They thought that operation would be quick and done fast, but as we see, they're lacking resources, they're lacking men on the ground, and clearly exhausted.
Yeah, this is, I think, the classical effect of the year 3, which we are entering in, and it is war. So this has a lot of negative impact also on the society, which is, let's say, not directly involved in the area. So the civil society living there, the living conditions in the Ukraine are disastrous, of course, because of the war situation. But also on the other side, we have to say also Putin's strategy doesn't pay off as he wanted. So it is somehow stuck, and we will see. And I think we as a European, we have really to think now what to do in the issue, especially when the Trump administration tries to step in like they are planned to start something what they would call peace talk. And I think if it comes to this, then the Europeans have the challenge also to make clear we only can accept real peace talks. This means that the Ukrainians are not only on the table, but also it is about their freedom, and it's not, and this cannot be, let's say, put on stake.
Yeah,
and Zelensky, of course, has his victory plan that he said he will only.
Yes, I think it's precisely one of the biggest challenges facing Europeans and Kaja Kallas in the coming months is really persuading the Trump administration that Europeans and European interests should be represented at the negotiating table between Trump and Putin, and negotiations between Russia, Ukraine, because it's not clear that that's, the thinking of the Trump administration and the Trump administration advisors. And so it's very important to explain that, communicate that effectively, that actually it's the Europeans who are going to bear the brunt of conflict escalation if, for example, a ceasefire is broken. It's the Europeans who have the economic leverage to bring to the table, to the negotiating table, as a possible trade-off in peace talks. It's the Europeans also who have to provide the security guarantees for Ukraine that will sort of help Ukraine remain independent with the capacity to defend itself. And also the Europeans have already extended indirectly.
And for now the Europeans have been ghosted. For example, the inauguration taking place on Monday, the Commission didn't get an invite and they have reached out, but they're waiting for some sort of a communication.
Yeah, why are we talking about Trump? Yes, Trump is important, US is important, but we need to start to talk about why we are not supporting Ukraine. Why we are not really supporting Ukraine in the real numbers. You know that the current support, military support to Ukraine, costs Europeans 1.5 cups of coffee a month. 1.5 cups of coffee a month for each European citizen. If we would increase it to 2 cups or 3 cups of coffee a month in the price of average coffee cup, then Ukraine will be able to win this war. But we're not doing it. We have countries who are not supporting at all. Austria, for example, they are on so big peace pigeon, so to say, that they are not supporting Ukraine militarily.
It's not completely true.
You are not supporting militarily.
Yeah, because Austria is a neutral country.
But people are killed in Ukraine, and you are just looking at it.
No, it's a neutral country, and this... which is a international law status, which is accepted by everybody, and this gives some limits, which means on military support, but this does not give any limit to humanitarian and political support.
But don't talk the numbers. I mean, the numbers are low anyway.
I think one discussion that was spearheaded by the prospect of, by these plans of the Trump administration that's saying that he's going to strike a deal in a day or now in the next...
Now he says 6 months.
Now he says 6 months. I think it's the discussion amongst EU member states and also the likelihood of coalition of the willing precisely to... of course, coalition of the willing within the EU context cannot be used in every possible situation, but there's very much sort of a shift in thinking about the fact that precisely to prevent, decisions that are taken by 27 member states, where some member states may not be supportive of increasing military support to Ukraine. There's a number of initiatives that have been considered in this format of coalition of the willing, and I think this is sort of also one of the lessons learned of the Trump administration.
But Rio has a point. It's kind of out of sight now, out of mind with Ukraine.
I think the problem here is that our governments in Europe have not been able to tell the people that it is not about Ukraine. It's about European values and European security. Because if Putin will win in Ukraine, then we will have 40 million angry Ukrainians against us with all the national resources. And pretty soon we will face the same threat to our borders. So we need to understand that Kiev is exactly the same distance from Berlin as it is from Tallinn. And we need to understand that is not about Ukrainians. It's about Austrians, Estonians and Germans and French and Spanish, also Portuguese.
And that's the message, in fact, the Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte, passed over this week when he was paying his very first visit to the European Parliament. He said, we're safe now but we might not be safe in 4 or 5 years. He also said EU countries must radically rethink their spending priorities to boost defence budget, saying that we're not at war, but we're not at peace either. Do you think that Austrians have gotten that message, that we may be safe now, we could be complacent, but in 4 or 5 years, the situation could be very different?
I think it is clear to everybody who wants to see it, because it's also not only about Russian aggression against Ukraine. We have the situation that also in Moldova since years Russian troops are present. And what we have seen just recently in the Romanian elections, what we have seen on other influential foreign interference hubs in Budapest, in Belgrade, and in other areas, we see also there is a threat to our society model, which is a democracy, which is freedom of media, freedom of speech, and this is steered by Russian and Russian oligarchs.
So you know the facts, but what is Austria going to do?
But Austria is, honestly, you can invite the next government and ask them what they will do at the moment, because Austria at the moment is completely supportive due to its, let's say, legal condition, and is sending a lot of aid, is supporting every political move, including the financial moves in the European Union. So Austria is not steering out. But if the EPP will vote for an extreme right prime minister,
let's come on to that later. Let's
they
just bring
will
in
switch off from the issue.
Sorry, SPÖ government, or all the governments before that have not really spent money. Austria has been freeloader of the alliances, European Union, because you are spending 0.77% on the GDP on defense. In the time where Estonia, with the 1.3 million people, is spending almost 4% on the GDP
but you know,
on defense.
The percent has nothing to do with the absolute number.
It does absolutely have something to do. It has something to do with the willingness of provide security and be part of the security. And if one is not doing it, the others must do more. That's very easy. And Austria has not doing anything on providing security in European continent by spending only 0.8% of the GDP on defense. So easy as it is.
And Donald Trump, of course, calling now for 5% expenditure of NATO members' GDP. Just briefly, EU and NATO relations. I mean, the NATO headquarters is here in town, but seems often very far away. Do you think under Mark Rutte they'll improve?
Yes, I mean, I think definitely they'll improve. I think one issue, for example, on providing security guarantees to Ukraine is precisely because it's very difficult to imagine how to provide security guarantees without considering the prospect of Ukraine's NATO membership. I think there's an ongoing discussion now among member states on how to provide those security guarantees without offering necessarily the prospect of NATO membership, because it's a very divisive, divisive topic. I think it's very important that Europeans also prepare for the fact that they're likely to face a deterrence-based security order in the coming years. So trying to prepare for a range of scenarios where Russia is not likely to disappear as a threat and is still likely to look at the West as also a source as a threat to their own.
And I just want to talk about Syria as well. You mentioned it earlier. It will be, of course, one of the challenges for Kaya Kallas. As you know, just before Christmas, Syria's dictator President Bashar al-Assad was ousted after 13 years of civil war, and the head of the Islamist militant group, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, is now the de facto leader of the country. Do you think the EU has paid enough attention, Rio, to the situation there?
Well, I think the problem with that is that it came as a surprise to almost everybody, to NATO, to European Union, to most of the countries. That only shows that we are not able to really have enough intelligence to understand the minds of the people there. But today we need to look at it, what is happening, and I think Kaja Kallas has a very capable team of helping her to make a right decision. We should not rush, because we should look what is coming out of it. But I think her first statements were very much in line what we from the European Union will accept from Syria.
And we wanted to actually hear how Syrians here in Brussels, who've built their lives here, how they felt and lived through this very historic moment. So we had a chat with Obada Otabashi. He owns We Exist. That's a Syrian restaurant and catering company here in the Belgian capital.
It was like the moment that we've been waiting now for 14 years. It was not easy. Those 14 years carried a lot of pain, a lot of suffer for Syrian people. We lost friends, we lost families. That when we were in Syria. Then when we left, we lost a lot of people in the sea trying to cross the continents. We really miss our country. We really miss our families. We miss our friends. We miss our neighborhoods. But to go back to live there again, I think it will take a while because the country is not stable. There is no electricity, there is no water, no clean water to drink. For asylum, if governments want to send them back, that will be really injustice.
Obada Otabashi there on the injustice, he says, of European governments contemplating sending asylum seekers back to Syria. Andreas, your reaction to that?
I have to make 2 points on this Syria issue, is because really also Katia Kallas and the European Commission looked very surprised, and for me too much surprised for the situation, because also, of course, the takeover was a surprise, but the general situation in the country and what it means should not be a surprise also to the High Representative. And I think the level playing field was too low on this issue. We have more information on the issue. We know also that there is a huge question of stability. We know that the Kurdish groups, they were also taking in hostage the Islamistic fighters, and now if they are free, we will see what's going on. So we have seen these things, and I think Europe has been much more active. Also, we need somebody who is asking Turkey on its role. We need somebody who is asking Iraq on its role.
Indeed, because of course the dictator may be gone, but chaos still lingers and there's still many armed groups active on the ground. But on that point, we can conclude this very interesting conversation. Stay with us though here on Euronews, because shortly we will be back to hear how Austria is on the cusp of crowning a brand new chancellor who's known for his love for Moscow and hatred of Brussels. Stay with us here on Euronews. Welcome back to Brussels, My Love, Euronews' weekly talk show. I'm Maeve McMahon, and along with my panel, we're just taking a look back at the big stories of the week. And one that we're following very carefully takes us to Austria, the Central European country of just over 9 million people. Elections last September saw victory claimed by the far-right Freedom Party of Austria, who's fronted by Herbert Kickl. FPÖ scooped 28.8% of the votes, while the centre-right Austrian People's Party, OFP, lost 20 seats and the Greens lost 10. So efforts are now underway to cobble together a coalition after previous attempts failed. And Karl Nehammer, who was Chancellor for the last few years, stepped down last weekend in what looks like a pretty chaotic situation in Austria. We're very lucky to have an Austrian socialist here on the table, so an Austrian politician. What is going on?
I have to say I was also involved in the negotiations, not only on the European and international issues, but also on the backside on the financial issues. And the president also gave the duty to Karl Nehammer, the leader of the EPP party, to form a government, a broader one, pro-European one, a pro-democracy one. And Karl Nehammer and the EPP failed at the end, in the sense of there was a lot of readiness for compromises, going away from the points from the election campaign to reach a compromise. But at the end, it was the EPP which also did not want to take any acceptance on the budget issue, because the budget point is the budget is in a very bad shape, much worse than the finance minister told us before the elections. But
The truth is coming out now, right, after the elections.
Yeah, he's quite happy because he's now commissioner in the European Commission, and nobody can make him responsible for this anymore. And how to close this hole?
Yeah.
On the broad way, the EPP was not willing to accept any consensus, and now it seems that they go quite quickly with the extreme right party. But with the thing is, we will not have an EPP chancellor, we will have an extreme right chancellor.
And even though Mr. Kickl and Mr. Nehammer hate each other, right? They don't get on.
Well, I would say that the socialists have been giving a pass of the ball, and they failed to get it because they're really left-wing populist ideas of tax increases of thousands of line items didn't allow the ÖVP to agree with it, because the people of Austria have not given a mandate to increase taxes. 60% of Austrian people do not want tax increases. But if the SPÖ was really willing to do the tax increase, wasn't it that way?
No,
well, let me finish.
Yeah,
and now the ball is there. But my proposal now, because I see the Kickel is not really somebody who we need to work with, because EPP and ÖVP, we are for pro-Europe, pro-Ukraine. What is important, pro-Ukraine and a pro-rule of law. So it is the time now to step out of the and for ÖVP, that's my point. From ÖVP, they have been in power since 1986. Isn't that right now the time to look back and say, okay, let the others do it?
Martha, as an observer, what is your take on what's going on here in Austria?
I mean, I observe more from a EU perspective and the implications that this can have on then a seat, of course, the seat at the European Council, especially a government that is could potentially be led by a far-right leader, and not only a far-right and hard-right leader, but a leader that can join the voices of those more pro-Russian voices that already exist in the European Council, can really create a problem for the President of the European Council, Antonio Costa, for also the rotating presidencies of the EU.
Well, let's just take a listen to Mr. Herbert Kickl, the 56-year-old who's coined by his fans as the People's Chancellor. We can take a listen now to his views on immigration, for example.
Remigration. I have absolutely no problem to say that word. But they are Syrians, Afghans, Somalis. There are many, many countries between them and us where they can request help and protection. We are not responsible for these people. The Islamic world should take care of their fellow brothers in faith.
So that's Herbert Kickl there. He's looking for a fortress Austria. He wants to see all non-nationals leave the countries, preserve traditional Austrian values. He's against NATO membership and more military support for Ukraine, minimum EU influence. But this guy's very popular, and your party, the Socialists, are not. You did very badly in the elections.
It's true. Of course it would. And also the country did better when socialists were number one and were able to have the prime minister. But the moment is, and this I have to say to the debate before, it is also Kickl will not be automatically prime minister. He needs a majority, and somebody has to give him the majority. And if EPP wants to give him the majority, they take also the responsibility that this guy, pro-Russian, anti-EU guy, is sitting in the European Council. And
this opens a whole new era, right, for European politics, because before we've had the firewall, we've had the cordon sanitaire.
It's quite simple.
I think we tend to look very much at the short term and the implications that this can result in the short term. But I think the issue of the rise of the far right in Europe and in the different political landscapes across different governments and member states and in the EU, in the Council, is gradual and incremental, and it may have implications in the long term. And I think we fail to see that. We focus too much on, now let's manage this problem for now, and now if he becomes Chancellor, he may be restrained by the coalition government. But the problem is, what's the trend that this indicates in the long term?
The Social Democrats of Austria have been given the possibility to form a government. There was the negotiations, and both parties, ÖVP and the NEO, tell that the socialists were not willing to give up the left-wing politics, and they were not able to form really a coalition government, and which brought us to the situation where we are right now. And the president, the Green president.
Brief reply there.
No, this is the easy lying excuse of conservatives that they always say the others are guilty, that we have now to accept extreme right.
They have not formed the government yet. They have not formed the government yet.
If you don't want, don't do it.
That's exactly what you did.
I was on the table, different to you. I was on the table. We removed from a lot of point of view. But what we had to say is, at the end, we have to find a compromise. And for a compromise between three, you need three. It is not that the EPP can claim a dictatorship on all content.
And on that point, We will bring this very interesting conversation to a close. For more on the developments in Austria, please keep a close eye on Euronews.com. But for now, thank you so much to our panel for being with us, and thank you for watching. See you very soon here on Euronews. Hello there and welcome to Brussels, my love, Euronews' weekly politics chat show. I'm Maeve McMahon, and along with our panel, Andreas Schieder, Austrian MEP with the Socialists and Democrats, Martha Mucik, EU Senior Analyst with the International Crisis Group, and Rio Terras, the Estonian MEP with the European People's Party. We are just taking a look at the news stories of the week. And one that we're digesting, given the last announcement from Meta to stop fact-checking in the US, is whether or not here in Europe we still trust and engage with mainstream media. Because according to a recent study by the European Broadcasting Union, that's the same organisation that organised the annual Eurovision, 6 in 10 of us do not trust most of the news, especially in countries like Greece and Malta, whereas in Sweden and Finland, trust is very, very high in the news. Meanwhile, 68% of EU citizens say they often come across misinformation, and then 4 in 10 Europeans say they just don't follow the news altogether. What would your reaction be to that, Martha? Do you still trust and follow mainstream media?
Yes, I very much trust and follow mainstream media. I have nothing against social media, but social media will never replace traditional, conventional media as far as I'm concerned. I think it's very disturbing statistics that the reports that you've mentioned have just came out with. I think social media is not a way to, not the right platforms and not the right medium to look for independent information.
But it's a reality for the majority of young people now. Their main news source is TikTok.
Yeah,
well, I think
it provides no context. It proliferates fake news, disinformation, and it's a way for politicians to speak directly to the people. But actually, it's propaganda. It's not information.
I have an 18 years old back home, and I have discussed with him all these topics. He says, "Papa, how can I look at the serious media? It's all behind the paywall. I don't have money. All the serious newspapers online are behind the paywall. We should start to think about how we could open up the quality media to the people, so that everybody, and that I think the governmental media needs to be more open, more possible to reach. BBC like in every country, or European, all over Europe, something
well, of course,
where we get
paywall because they're in survival mode.
Today's internet is 70% produced by the artificial intelligence, and the question is, people say that it is in the future to 90% produced by the artificial intelligence.
Paywalls pay salaries, of course, don't they?
Yeah, but honestly, there is a lot of serious news channels and platforms which are not behind the paywall. The public broadcasters are completely accessible.
And Euronews, you can watch.
Exactly. But also the Austrian public broadcaster, and also they went to social media in order to have some real media. And what do I mean with real media is checking, fact-checking and rechecking. But what we see in the statistics is even worse, because this distribution, if you take the age, youngsters are taking as a source of information only what they see on social media. So I think there is coming up a big problem, and the problem itself is coming from the algorithms, because we know that on social media the algorithms, they spill over the more decisive hatred, strange content, and the boring, serious information is downrated, and this of course creates something with you. So if you can make,
but the answer is education. I've heard that in Belgium, in the schools, you have every week a lesson which talks you how to read the TikTok, how to read the news, how to read the information you get it. And if you then really go behind it, and if the young people will understand that is all fake news, they will skip it and have just entertainment.
But I think we need also regulation of. We need transparency.
We do have regulation. We have the DSA, the Digital Services Act. We have the European Freedom, the Media Freedom Law. But also, just on the point of the future of journalism, we wanted to bring in the perspective of Renate Schröder. She's the director of the European Federation of Journalists. Let's take a listen to her.
In a world of toxic news, of polarization, of complexities. We need journalism. We need, and I even fear the Trump effect has a potential that people realize that something is missing, that they need facts. Journalists are the only ones who have, in theory, the tools for that. They are the ones who research, they are the ones who fact check and who make politicians accountable. This is the reason why politicians don't like journalists.
Renate Schroeder there on the need for journalism. But Martha, how can journalism survive in a world where a lot of advertising money is really just going to big tech?
Yes, I mean, that's a good question, but I also think journalism and traditional media should offer to the public exactly what social media can't, which is real investigative reporting, just as your colleague was discussing, investigative fact-checking programs on TV, for example, even discussing the debates on Twitter and social media and sort of highlighting what's fake news and what's not, good opinion pieces by,
But of course, that all costs money. Would you agree there with Renate Schroeder that politicians don't like journalists?
Yes, and as we discussed before, Austria, for example, to ask the EPP politician why they spoke so dramatically against Kickl and now support them is a journalistic question which you have to put on the table. But also we need journalists. Also we need what we need.
It's like a love-hate relationship.
Yeah, no, but I think it's a natural one. But because you mentioned before the European laws which in the last period were done, and I think they're good and they make the difference between the US situation and the European situation. But also what we need now is a European Commission which uses these tools 100%. I think they spoke out, but we have to really use this 100% because this media freedom is important, and also we need to strengthen the public and serious broadcasters.
But this is a global problem, not just a European problem. And if the European Commission has all these regulations in place, but then worldwide and globally we have no...
The journalists need to get better. The current time, people are not able to read more than 130 signs.
That's better.
Yeah.
I think journalists already do a wonderful job.
They're too much. You have to be entertaining with the real information, and that is very difficult to do.
It is indeed, but we do our best. Rio Terrace, thank you so much for being with us. Martha Muchik as well, and Andreas Schieder, thank you very much for being our panel this weekend, and thank you so much for watching. If you would like, of course, to get in touch with us, do send us a note to brusselsmylove@euronews.com. For more news in depth, you can also take a look at euronews.com. Thank you so much, though, for tuning in, and we'll see you very, very soon again, we hope, on Euronews.